Game of Thrones is a legendary television adaptation of the novel series by George R.R. Martin, which over the course of 8 seasons told viewers about the complex lives of crowned rulers, warriors, and common folk far removed from intrigues and conspiracies. And although more than 6 years have passed since the final episode aired, the series continues to remain one of the most discussed in the world, with its fan base growing every day. In this video, I will rascage you about how the idea to create Game of Thrones was born, which actors competed for the leading roles, where the key scenes were filmed, and why this project left such a deep mark on the history of 21st century cinema. The book series, A Song of Ice and Fire, created by the American writer and producer George R.R. Martin, became widely known long before the first season of Game of Thrones was released. It has been translated into 45 languages, and its total circulation has exceeded 90 million copies. For the first 3 books, George R.R. Martin received several nominations and prestigious awards, including the Locus Magazine Award for Best Fantasy Novel. In January 2006, after the publication of the 4th part of the saga, A Feast for Crows, the writer's literary agent called screenwriter David Benioff and suggested that he consider adapting A Song of Ice and Fire for the screen. Since David had been interested in fantasy works from an early age, he agreed, even though at that moment he had not yet read a single book from the series. Sometime later, Benioff received all the volumes of A Song of Ice and Fire and immediately began studying them. It took him only a few hundred pages of the first book to realize that this story had a great future. He promptly contacted his friend Daniel Weiss and shared his thoughts about a possible screen adaptation of George Martin's books. However, desire alone was not enough to work on such a large-scale project. David and Daniel still had to persuade the writer to allow them to adapt A Song of Ice and Fire. The screenwriters met Martin at a restaurant on Santa Monica Boulevard in Los Angeles and spent 5 hours negotiating with him. George did not initially believe that Benioff and Weiss were capable of handling such a task well, since at that time they had only one successful joint project: the screenplay for the film Troy. Nevertheless, he decided to choose them because they proved themselves to be true fans of the tales of the Seven Kingdoms and were able to reveal one of the main secrets of the saga: the origin of Eddard Stark's bastard. Martin asked David and Daniel who Jon Snow's real parents were, and without hesitation they answered: Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, the eldest son of Aerys II, known as the Mad King. Later, Daniel Weiss told journalists that thanks to the correct answer to this question, the world ultimately saw Game of Thrones. It helped Martin understand that the young men had read A Song of Ice and Fire attentively and fully grasped its complex plot. It is worth noting that before Weiss and Benioff, other screenwriters had also met with the author, but he refused them, believing that his fantasy novels were too difficult to adapt. A huge number of characters, intricate histories of the ruling houses of the Seven Kingdoms, and the presence of fairly explicit scenes. All of this did not fit into the framework of a typical feature film. However, when Martin learned that the premium television network, HBO, owned by Warner Bros. Discovery, was planning to produce not a film but an entire series, he became interested in the idea and agreed to discuss it. Work on Game of Thrones began in January 2007, immediately after HBO acquired the rights to produce a television project based on A Song of Ice and Fire. David Benioff and Daniel Weiss took on the roles of executive producers, while George Martin himself became a co-producer. Immediately after the deal between HBO and the writer was finalized, Benioff and Weiss began working on the script for the pilot episode, which they titled Winter is Coming. Its first version was completed in August 2007, and the second in June 2008. Both scripts impressed HBO's management, but the filming of the first episode was postponed for several months. The main reasons for the delay were the large-scale writers' strike in the United States and the prolonged selection of candidates for the leading roles, handled by Nina Gold and Robert Stern. Casting actors for the pilot episode of Game of Thrones turned out to be quite challenging, though it was not without amusing incidents. For example, Kit Harington, a candidate for the role of Jon Snow, arrived at the audition with a bruise around his eye. The day before, the young man had gotten into a fight over a girl and received a hard blow to the face. The bruise turned out to be quite fitting. It gave Kit a sense of rugged masculinity that matched the image of Ned Stark's bastard. Richard Madden, who played Robb Stark in the series, worried that he would not be cast because of his young age. He even tried to alter his voice to sound older, but his attempts looked rather awkward and caused smiles among the casting team. Nevertheless, he was approved for the role of the eldest son of the Warden of the North, since outwardly he resembled a nobleman who had been forced to grow up too early. Another unusual situation occurred with 12-year-old Maisie Williams. She almost missed the casting because her class was planning a field trip to a farm that day. Maisie's mother understood that her daughter aspired to an acting career, so she advised her to skip the trip and go to the audition, thanks to her boyish appearance, bold character, and ability to perfectly portray a cold-blooded young killer. Williams outperformed 300 other candidates for the role of Arya Stark and later received numerous awards, including the Berlin International Film Festival's Rising Star Prize. Sophie Turner, Maisie Williams' colleague and the on-screen elder sister of her character, ended up at the casting almost by accident. She went there on the advice of her teacher. Before the audition, she changed her hair color from blonde to chestnut to match the overall appearance of the Stark family. Jason Momoa stood out the most during the auditions. He did not read the provided lines at all, but instead performed a ritual dance of the New Zealand Maori. The actor's powerful physique, loud shouts, and sharp movements made an incredible impression on Nina Gold and Robert Stern. They immediately realized that no one but Jason could convincingly portray the brutal Khal Drogo, the leader of the ruthless Dothraki. Among the other actors who auditioned for the pilot episode of Game of Thrones was British actress Tamsin Merchant, who was cast as Daenerys Targaryen. Jennifer Ale also auditioned and was offered the role of Catelyn, Ned Stark's wife. Nikolai Coster-Waldau and Lena Headey were cast as the Lannister twins, while Jack Gleeson brought to life the spoiled prince Joffrey Baratheon. The only actors who joined the series without auditions were Peter Dinklage and Sean Bean. The creators of the project initially envisioned them as Tyrion Lannister and Eddard Stark, and therefore did not consider any other candidates for these roles. After the casting process was completed and the script approved, the project team began filming the pilot episode of Game of Thrones. From October to November 2009, the crew traveled to Northern Ireland, Morocco, and Scotland to capture unique landscapes, ancient fortresses, and majestic structures such as Castle Ward. David Benioff and Daniel Weiss were satisfied with the results and first showed them to their colleague, American director Craig Mazin, hoping that he would suggest a few edits and advise what needed to be changed or removed altogether. However, they were deeply surprised when Craig handed them a notebook containing only one phrase written in large letters, a huge problem. HBO's management expressed a similar opinion. They believed that the rough cut of the first episode contained many strange decisions, unclear moments for viewers, and that the presentation of key scenes was rather weak. For example, the relationship between Cersei and Jaime was not revealed at all. In the pilot materials, nothing indicated that they were close relatives. Robert Baratheon's arrival in Winterfell was also unimpressive. The actors did not bow to him, showed no proper respect, and generally behaved as if they were greeting a friend rather than a king. Other shortcomings of the test episode included awkward costumes for some of the main characters, a comical feast held in honor of Robert Baratheon and his retinue, as well as an unsuccessful wedding scene between Daenerys Targaryen and Khal Drogo, which was filmed in Morocco. Such a negative assessment of long and painstaking work shocked Benioff and Weiss. However, after overcoming a mix of resentment and disappointment, they promised to take all the flaws into account and reshoot the episode entirely. The The screenwriters showed incredible persistence and managed to convince HBO's management to give them a second chance. However, revising the script and reviewing the existing footage was not enough. The producers decided that the first step should be changes to the cast. The most notable replacement was Tamsin Merchant, who herself chose to leave the project. According to the actress, she had never planned to appear in Game of Thrones in the first place and attended the audition under pressure from acquaintances. During the filming of a scene in Morocco, which required her to ride a horse while naked, she finally realized that this project was not for her. Emilia Clarke was cast to replace Tamsin Merchant. Her first meeting with the creators took place in a dark and dimly lit room at the television network. The young and delicate actress made a strong impression on the screenwriters by demonstrating her ability to quickly transform from a naive girl into a strong and commanding woman. Everyone present was delighted, except for the president of HBO. He stared gloomily at the actress throughout the audition, creating a tense and unfriendly atmosphere. Emilia sensed this and asked what she could do to ease the tension. As a joke, David Benioff suggested that she dance something, and she immediately began performing the robot dance. It was so charming that the president finally smiled and approved her for the role of Daenerys Targaryen. In addition to Tamsin Merchant, Jennifer Ehle also left the project. She was replaced by Michelle Fairley, who, in the opinion of many, perfectly portrayed Lady Catelyn Stark. Work on the new version of the first episode of Game of Thrones, Winter is Coming, began in 2010. Thanks to changes in the cast and the reshooting of almost 90% of the scenes, the second attempt turned out to be far more successful than the previous one. However, HBO's management did not rush to make a final decision. According to Benioff and Weiss, they had to wait about 9 months before receiving official approval to begin production of the entire series. To show viewers the endless plains of Essos, the cold north, the luxurious palaces of the south, and other unique locations, the Game of Thrones crew traveled extensively across Europe. Most episodes were filmed in the capital of Northern Ireland, Belfast, where the Paint Hall Film Studio is located. On its grounds, sets were built for the castle of King's Landing, Winterfell, the main headquarters of the Night's Watch, as well as the hall with the Iron Throne. In addition to Belfast, the actors and other members of the team visited Tollymore Forest Park, where the first scenes beyond the wall were filmed, the small fishing harbour of Ballantoy, which became the Iron Islands, and Doune Castle in the Stirling district, transformed into the ancestral home of the Starks. However, the landscapes of Northern Ireland could not convey the atmosphere of other parts of Westeros on screen. Therefore, in 2010, the filming process was moved to Malta, a place famous worldwide for its picturesque bays, numerous ancient forts, and ruins. The main filming location in Malta was the ancient city of Medina. Near its old gates, scenes were shot depicting Lady Catelyn's arrival in King's Landing and her farewell to Ned Stark. In the same city, on Mosquito Square, was located the brothel of Lord Peter Baelish. The episode celebrating the wedding of Daenerys Targaryen and Khal Drogo was filmed on the Maltese island of Gozo. The couple received gifts from guests against the backdrop of the Azure Window, a rock arch that collapsed in 2017 during a powerful storm. In the second season, the producers abandoned Malta and chose the city of Dubrovnik in Croatia for scenes set in King's Landing. Its narrow streets, high fortress walls, dense clusters of buildings, and access to the Adriatic Sea perfectly matched the image of the capital of the Seven Kingdoms. Scenes beyond the wall were filmed in Iceland, on the Vatnajökull and Svinafellsjökull glaciers, as well as in an ice cave located in Skaftafell National Park. Local residents who observed the filming later recalled that actors and camera operators constantly complained about the extreme cold and piercing gusts of wind. Such harsh weather conditions added realism to the scenes and allowed viewers to see what the true harsh north looks like. The third and fourth seasons of Game of Thrones were filmed mostly in the same locations, Croatia and Iceland. Only for a short time did the crew travel to Morocco to shoot scenes in cities surrounded by endless sands. Essaouira appeared on screen as Astapor, while the ancient fortress of Ait Benhadou, with its unique Eastern architecture, became Yunkai. In the 5th season, the project's leadership insisted on expanding the geography of filming, and the entire team moved to Spain. In Seville, the Gardens of Dorn were filmed on the grounds of the Royal Alcazar Palace. The Roman bridge in Córdoba was turned into part of the free city of Volantis, and the ruins of an ancient Roman theatre in Osuna were transformed into the fighting pits of Myrine, where the Sons of the Harpy attempted to kill the Mother of Dragons. After the 5th season received numerous enthusiastic reviews from both critics and fans of Game of Thrones, the producers decided to film even more episodes in Spain. The actors and crew visited Seville, Almeria, and Navarre, regions famous for their stunning landscapes and unique architecture. At the same time, they continued to return to Dubrovnik in Croatia, which remained the foundation for King's Landing, and to snow-covered Iceland. The 7th season of the series was again filmed in Croatia, Spain, and Iceland, while the final season was almost entirely shot in Northern Ireland, particularly in the villages of Moneyglass and Saintfield. It was there that the legendary Battle of Winterfell took place, shown in the 3rd episode titled The Long Night. According to the screenwriters, the Battle for Winterfell became the most difficult stage of the team's work. A huge number of sets were prepared, and filming lasted for almost 2 months. However, such titanic effort proved justified. Fans of the series were pleased with the unpredictable plot twists, special effects, and strong performances by the actors, but they negatively criticized the abrupt conclusion of the White Walkers' storyline and the deaths of their favorite characters, such as Lady Melisandre, Edison Tollett, and Jorah Mormont. Game of Thrones entered the history of modern cinema as one of the most expensive television series in the world. Only the multi-season Western Westworld and such high-profile Netflix projects as The Crown and Stranger Things can compare to it in terms of production costs. According to information published by authoritative media outlets, the first season cost HBO almost $60 million. Of this amount, up to $10 million was allocated to the filming of the pilot episode Winter is Coming. The second season turned out to be even more expensive. The costliest episode was the Battle of the Blackwater, the largest clash in the War of the Five Kings. For its production, Daniel Weiss and David Benioff requested $8 million from the network's executives, which caused the overall budget of the second season to increase by almost 15% compared to the previous one. In the following 3 seasons, the budget of each episode stabilized and did not exceed $8 million. However, at times the production costs went beyond this limit due to the need to stage large-scale battles, film scenes requiring advanced visual effects, hire massive numbers of extras, and create dragons using computer-generated imagery. In 2016, production costs rose sharply once again. At that time, the team was working on the 6th season, and the cost of a single episode reached $10 million, with the exception of the 9th episode, Battle of the Bastards. It was about half again as expensive as the other episodes due to the difficulties the team faced while staging the battle between Jon Snow and his allies and the Bolton army. The total budget of the 6th season reached $100 million, setting a record for television series. The budget of the 7th season, consisting of 7 episodes, exceeded $90 million, and each episode of the 8th part of Game of Thrones cost HBO an average of $15 million. It is worth noting that most of the money allocated to the series was spent not on sets or computer graphics, but on the salaries of the actors who played the main roles. For example, Emilia Clarke, Peter Dinklage, Nikolai Coster-Waldau, Lena Headey, and Kit Harington decided to renegotiate their contracts in the autumn of 2014 and demanded $300,000 per episode from HBO. Their terms were accepted, and sometime later, when the series became even more popular and profitable, Each of these actors began earning $500,000 per episode. According to expert estimates, the total budget of Game of Thrones amounted to $1.5 billion. This is an incredibly large sum for a television series, but such investments yielded tangible results. HBO earned an average of $280 million from each season. The company's main profits came from selling international broadcast rights, DVD releases, merchandise, souvenir products, and monthly subscriptions to the HBO Max streaming service, which was the first to air new episodes. Game of Thrones became a creative, moral, and physical trial for everyone involved, including cinematographers, stunt performers, and production designers. For many years, they worked in regions with harsh weather conditions, fell ill, and sustained injuries of varying severity. In addition, conflicts often arose between colleagues, not always ending on a positive note, and some of the actors had to cope with harsh criticism and even harassment alongside filming. Sophie Turner, who played Sansa Stark, suffered the most from bullying by viewers. Fans of the series relentlessly discussed the actress's appearance and left disgusting comments on her social media pages, mocking the condition of her skin and hair as well as her body weight. At that time, Sophie was a teenager, and the constant stream of negativity seriously harmed her fragile mental health. She was constantly anxious, slept poorly, and eventually fell into deep depression, also developing an eating disorder. In 2019, the actress admitted that she suffered from anorexia and knew that the cause was the Game of Thrones fans who criticized her weight. She also spoke about undergoing long-term psychotherapy, which literally saved her life. Jack Gleeson, who played Prince Joffrey Baratheon, also faced harassment. He portrayed the main villain of the first 3 seasons so convincingly that viewers began to express hostility not only toward the character, but toward the actor himself. He was constantly insulted online, cursed at during encounters on the street, and received notes containing humiliations and threats. In interviews, Jack said that this became the main reason why he had to leave the project and give up a successful film career. No less tragic events occurred with other actors who played leading roles in the series. For example, Emilia Clarke, known as Daenerys Targaryen, suffered ruptured brain aneurysms with subarachnoid hemorrhage in 2011 and 2013. She spent a long time in the hospital, temporarily lost the ability to speak, underwent several surgeries, and nearly fell into a coma. Many people worried about her life, especially Jason Momoa. The actor who played Khal Drogo supported her in every possible way and was overjoyed when he learned that Emilia had recovered and was ready to return to filming. Kit Harington, who portrayed the bastard Jon Snow, was exhausted by constant filming and intense physical training, which was further complicated by an ankle fracture sustained in 2012. Against the background of fatigue and excessive attention from fans, he developed depression, later followed by alcohol addiction. Everything culminated when 1 year after the end of the 8th season, he entered a rehabilitation center where he underwent long-term treatment for alcohol dependence and mental health issues. However, there were not only dark moments during the making of Game of Thrones. Many actors fondly recall the time spent on set, as it was there that they found true friends and even love. Kit Harington and Rose Leslie, who played Ygritte of the Wildlings, met in 2012 during the filming of the 2nd season. After 5 years of continuous relationship, the couple announced their engagement and, a year later, held their wedding ceremony at the ancestral Scottish castle of the Leslie clan. In the winter of 2021, the couple welcomed a son, and in the summer of 2025, Rose gave birth to a daughter. Maisie Williams and Sophie Turner, the Stark sisters, became best friends from the very first day. The actresses often shared joint photos on social media, attended various events together, and gave interviews side by side. In 2019, Maisie served as a bridesmaid at Sophie's wedding to American musician Joseph Jonas. Another story of strong friendship is connected with Peter Dinklage and Lena Headey. The actors who portrayed the brother and sister Lannisters who hated each other on screen spent a lot of time together off camera. Moreover, they were even neighbours while living in the capital of Northern Ireland. According to Lena Headey, it was Peter who advised the producers to invite her to audition for the role of Cersei, and she is grateful to him for that, as participation in Game of Thrones brought her worldwide fame and radically changed her life. Before the release of the screen adaptation of A Song of Ice and Fire, television series significantly lagged behind films in terms of quality, especially in the fantasy genre. The emergence of Game of Thrones, with its stunning visual effects, detailed dragons, and large-scale battles, forced other streaming services to invest more money in their own projects in order to attract the attention of increasingly demanding viewers. In addition to setting new standards for visual effects, costumes, and set design, Game of Thrones was among the first to present a well-executed complex narrative featuring numerous characters with distinct personalities. This contributed to the increasing complexity of storylines in other modern series, such as Vikings, The Last Kingdom, His Dark Materials, and The Witcher. At the same time, the project had a powerful influence on popular culture. It became a source of inspiration for fan fiction and comics, creators of viral content, artists, musicians, game developers, and even cosplayers. Special attention should be given to Game of Thrones' role in the development of European tourism. Filming locations quickly turned into major tourist attractions. The flow of people eager to see Westeros, King's Landing, the Fortress of Winterfell, and the fighting pits where the enslaved Jorah Mormont fought has not stopped to this day. A particularly strong influx of tourists has been observed in Northern Ireland and Croatia, which has had a positive effect on the economies of several cities in these countries. For example, high demand for tours to Dubrovnik contributed to improvements in local infrastructure and the opening of new shops where souvenirs and various Game of Thrones merchandise can be purchased at any time. Fans of the series also frequently travel to Iceland. There, long excursions across glaciers and mountains where key events beyond the wall were filmed are organized annually. Anyone who wishes can take part in themed costume photo sessions and listen to behind-the-scenes stories about the making of the series. The final episode of Game of Thrones, titled The Iron Throne, aired on May 19, 2019. This event caused sadness, shock, disappointment, and even anger among millions of fans. The main reason for these emotions was an unexpected plot twist: the proclamation of Bran Stark as the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. Many viewers expected Daenerys Targaryen to ascend the throne, or at the very least, the noble and just Jon Snow. Instead, the ruler became a character who, throughout the entire series, stood out for little more than his ability to inhabit other living beings. Numerous negative posts on this topic appeared on Twitter. The author of one of them called Bran Stark a useless character and unworthy of the title of the new king of Westeros. In addition to angry messages on social media, fans created a petition demanding that HBO reshoot the entire 8th season of Game of Thrones with new screenwriters. In their opinion, David Benioff and Daniel Weiss ruined the finale of the series because they personally wrote the scripts for all 6 episodes. Within 3 months, the petition gathered more than 1.5 million signatures, but HBO categorically refused to remake the final season. Company representatives asked fans to accept the ending as Benioff and Weiss envisioned it. The decision to make Bran king was not the only thing viewers disliked. Many were dissatisfied with the small number of episodes in the final season, considering them insufficient to logically conclude the fates of some key characters in the saga. In addition, they strongly criticized new production mistakes made by the crew. One of the most discussed was a Starbucks coffee cup left on the table next to Daenerys during the celebration of victory over the White Walkers. Another anachronism was a bottle of mineral water placed behind Samwell Tarly's leg. This occurred in the 6th episode, during the scene in which the council chose the new ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. some actors who appeared in Game of Thrones reacted strongly to the harsh criticism. Sophie Turner condemned the petition demanding a reboot of the 8th season, calling it an extreme display of disrespect toward the many years of hard work by the production team. Nikolai Coster-Waldau, who attended Comic-Con in 2019, stated that the fans' reaction did not surprise him. He expected negativity, as it had happened repeatedly throughout the series' run, but still considered the anger of viewers excessive and absurd. Professional film critics also failed to understand the screenwriter's vision and labeled the 8th season the weakest one, while users of the well-known review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes gave The Iron Throne a score of 6.3 out of 10. George Martin, the author of A Song of Ice and Fire, did not support the general wave of dissatisfaction. In his blog, he thanked the actors, producers, screenwriters, and other members of the crew for their work, and emphasized that he was quite satisfied with the final result. For many actors, working on Game of Thrones became life-changing. Some rapidly climbed the career ladder and became some of the most recognizable stars in show business, while others chose to leave the film industry, opting for a calm and measured life. Jack Gleeson, who played Joffrey Baratheon, disappeared from the public eye for a long time. He gave only a few interviews in which he explained why he no longer wanted to appear on television. First and foremost, this was because, for viewers, he would forever remain the vile, selfish, and cruel son of Cersei Lannister. In addition, during his time on the project, the young man realized that fame and acting growth were not important to him. Jack preferred participating in small theatrical productions that did not attract much public attention. However, several years ago, he seems to have changed his mind. In 2023, Jack played Kevin, the henchman of a crime boss, in the thriller The Last Mercenary, and in 2025, he accepted an offer to appear in the series The Sandman. Among other actors who did not pursue an active television career after Game of Thrones was Isaac Hempstead Wright, known to viewers as Bran Stark. After the end of the 8th season, he focused on his university studies, received several minor film roles, and voiced characters in 3 animated films. The remaining actors who played the main characters in the story of the Seven Kingdoms continued to actively appear in major projects. Sophie Turner, Kit Harington, Emilia Clarke, Richard Madden, Liam Cunningham, Gwendolyn Christie, and others regularly participate in television shows and receive roles in various films and series. Maisie Williams deserves special mention. She not only remained one of the most in-demand British actresses, but also entered the ranks of successful young entrepreneurs. Together with film producer Dom Santry, Maisie runs a platform for helping aspiring actors find work, collaborates with well-known fashion houses, and invests in cryptocurrency. After the incredible success of Game of Thrones, HBO decided not to stop there and began actively developing new television projects capable of attracting fans of George Martin's works. The most well-known among them became the prequel House of the Dragon, a fantasy series that first aired on August 21, 2022. The first and second seasons of House of the Dragon received high praise from viewers and film critics. Reviews highlighted the well-developed storyline, compelling characters, musical score, and visual effects. After that, HBO officially announced plans to produce 2 more seasons, the last of which will be the final one. Exact release dates for the new episodes are not yet known. In parallel with the filming of House of the Dragon, several spin-offs were in development, but most of them were not approved. Among the frozen projects was the television series 10,000 Ships. It was supposed to tell the story of the warlike Princess Nymeria, who traveled to Dorne with her people and married Mors Martell. Another series that we may never see is called The Sea Snake. According to preliminary information, its plot was to focus on Corlys Velaryon, the Lord of the Tides and head of the naval fleet of the King of the Andals and the First Men. However, 10,000 Ships and The Sea Snake are not exactly what Game of Thrones fans want. They are eagerly awaiting an announcement from HBO, about the revival of the Jon Snow storyline, which was previously reported in the media in June 2022. Nevertheless, Kit Harington, who played Ned Stark's bastard, said in an interview with the online publication Collider that fans should not hope for a continuation of his character's story. The main reason for abandoning the idea is the lack of writers capable of creating a unique script that would not repeat information already known to those who watched Game of Thrones. As of today, it is known for certain that since 2021, HBO has been working on another adaptation of George Martin's novellas, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. The main characters of the series will be the Westerosi knight Duncan the Tall and a young boy named Egg, who is in fact a prince of the Targaryen dynasty, Aegon V, known as the Unlikely. According to official information, the first season of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms will consist of 6 episodes, and Sir Duncan and Aegon will be portrayed by actors Peter Claffey and Dexter Saul Ansell. The premiere of the series is scheduled for the end of 2025. And that's all from me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell. Your activity is the best reward for me. Thank you for your attention. See you soon. Bye.